Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
So what can you learn from past lives, and how far back can you go, and how far away can you go to discover who you were in a past life? Hello, this is Angelscapes, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. And in this episode, we're talking to Deborah Richmond Foulkes. She has an incredible background on past lives, but she had an amazing accounting of one specific life that carried her through many, many years. Her memories were so accurate that she was able to travel to Scotland and uncover historical items and archives that even the historians didn't know about. And she kind of connected the dots on a few historical events that kind of changed. I don't think it changed the history, but it really illuminated what went on in ancient Scotland. So we're going to learn about her amazing experiences. And Deborah Foulkes, Richmond Foulkes, is a certified medium, and she's also studied Morris Pratt. So she is a commissioned medium, and she is a master of masters in Reiki, and she has done a tremendous amount of trance development. And she's also studied with Dr. Brian Weiss for past life regression. So her credentials are as long as God's arm. So welcome. So let's talk a little bit about past lives and how you kind of opened up to all of this, and then let's talk about what you did with it.
Okay. Well, I really have to go back to I was not communicating in 1999 when my dog Larry died. He was 17 years old, an Irish Wolfhound. And I found myself going, where's Larry and what do I do? I called Lydia Clark for a reading, and she was the one who discovered John Edward. And Lydia kind of pointed me in a direction. She gave me my first reading, which says, your daughter is right here. I said, well, I don't have a daughter. I didn't have a miscarriage. I didn't have an abortion. I didn't adopt. I don't have a daughter. And she says, I'm telling you, and she's from Brooklyn, so you kind of have to listen to her. And anyway, so the funny thing about it is that I kept saying, wonder who she is. I wonder who she is. And 2 or 3 years later, I was in Woodham Ferris and found out that she had drowned there. And they had recorded, they say ghosts haunting that area. And there was a young girl, a big gray dog, and a knight on horseback, which would have been her father, William Douglas. Anyway, so tracing all that back and stumbling upon information, that's how it all worked. And it was daily meditation, twice a day. I wrote everything down. And that's when I teach mediumship. I'm sure you do the same thing. You stress the fact that you have to do meditation, you have to do it daily, and you have to write down what you get. Right. And that's basically what I did. So from there, I had this inkling that, I had a past life in Scotland. And I remember as a little girl listening, and my favorite story was Rapunzel. And I said, Rapunzel, why is that? But my grandmother used to read me that story over and over. And then I found this story of Eleanor de Ferrers, who was actually kidnapped from a castle that I was finally able to see. A friend of mine owns the castle up in the Lothians in Scotland. And I identified the story, and she actually sent me the history of that occurrence. And that happened around 1289. So all these things started happening, and I used to have recurring dreams about things. I think that's when people talk about past lives, they go, well, what will it do me? Well, there's a reason you have some recurring dreams, and some of them are because you had a past life that you need to heal from. So one of my past lives was that one being kidnapped, and being taken to, well, not against my will. I pretty much felt that it was kind of like Rapunzel, let down your long hair and the night would kind of rescue you. And that was the whole thing. So uh, with that in mind, that's how the healing worked for me. I started to address it, found the records in Scotland as well as England to verify those very happenings. And that bolstered my belief that I was getting a lot of good information from mediumship.
Wow. Wow. So you developed this past life meditation and then and mediumship at the same time. I remember we were studying together in a class and you were kind of talking about these past lives and these things that we were getting drawn into, and I was fascinated with the whole thing. So that happened at the same time then, roughly.
Everything happened at the same time. You couldn't really segregate information and say, well, what does that mean? I saw these circular stone carvings that were about 20 inches in diameter. And that didn't show up until about 4 years later when I was at Knaresborough Castle in Yorkshire, and I found them outside of the castle, and it validated the fact that William Douglas was held prisoner there. And this is a really interesting thing because the great historians like William Bain and others, William Fraser, who wrote the Douglas books, these people translated Norman French and Latin. They excuse my clock. They translated these entries from the rolls of the pipe, all the records in Scotland and England, and they translated into English. And it said De Castri de Leeds. Well, they said that they thought the Castri de Leeds meant Leeds, down in the southern part of England where the Queen was staying. It was a tiny castle, couldn't be. So I'm saying, what the heck happened? And I sent in my file for the book to have it published and the galley. And they called me, oh, I'm sorry, there wasn't anything on your file. Then the next day I overnighted it again. And I said, oh my God, it cost me $35 to send it to you again. They said, well, the file was corrupted. Saturday, a book came and it said, oh, look, here is Leeds Castle. And I went, well, he couldn't have been in this castle. It's too tiny. It's not even big enough for the Queen. So that's when I said, what does it mean? And they told me it meant of the Castri de Leeds, meant a half day's ride from. So I took Leeds Castle and I looked for 10 miles away, and there was Knaresborough. And when I did the research, it said that the King Edward was revamping the whole place, and he had a criminal court there, he had a prison there, and he had a huge entourage there. He was getting ready for going after Scottish noblemen, and that's where he was going to hold them. So imagine all these great historical, I mean, they're experts in their field missing that. But I mean, also imagine how many books and how many translations they did. So it was kind of like, oh, the Castle de Leeds. That means, the castle in Leeds.
So going back to the book that you were sending out, it kept coming. It never made it. So you changed
when as soon as I changed it, there were 35 references to Knaresborough in it. They said, oh, everything was fine, and they published it. And that was this book, which is, I don't know if you can see it because I've turned on that ridiculous thing. But anyway, you can kind of see what it looks like here. But it is My Truth Lies in the Ruins. And that was the first book of the Douglas trilogy. So it was just how it went. And I found that.
Well, you keep talking. I'm going to share a picture of this.
Okay.
My Truth. Can you see that? My Truth in the shadow of my.
In the trial. That was the second book.
Let's see if we find the first book. And then The Flames of My Truth. This is a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
But
that gives you kind of a picture of it there.
And then your book cover on this particular website? Oh, there's your babies. Oh, there. So
Yeah, yeah. Actually it should be, but I'm not seeing it. Anyway, In the Shadow was like the second book, but I should have this, and I should be able to send it to you because there's some drawings I wanted to show you,
yeah.
and how they worked out. And I don't know now if I can do that. But anyway, yeah, there are a lot of on the website for the books in the historical part. That one right here at the top now. That was the white building there. That was the original manor house at Woodham Ferrers. It wasn't the one that that the manor told me to find on Manor Road, but that was the main manor house, and a part of it was destroyed in a fire. But the original moat was there, and there was a secret passage to the priory, and Eleanor's daughter drowned in that moat.
That's the daughter that came through in that first reading.
Yep, exactly. She died in 1294 in that incarnation.
This is amazing, and you knew all of these when these buildings were new and all standing. And
oh yeah, that's what's fascinating about it, isn't it?
oh gosh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
So there were. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to tell people that all these books are on Barnes and Noble, and they're on Amazon, and you could actually search for Deborah Richmond Foulkes and find a lot of her work. But I really recommend. I've read. I mean, they're good reads, and what's amazing to me in these books, you might laugh at me, is you have the Scottish language down so well. It's like you're there. You really truly lived it. You were remembering it, and so in this work, we were learning mediumship. I remember we were doing a lot of mediumships, but you took further. You were going into trance, like you said, meditate every day and writing things down. But then you went to England, to Stansted Hall, right? And Finley,
the Arthur Findlay College.
England.
And when I went to Arthur Findlay College, I was studying with Glenn Edwards, and at the late Glenn Edwards. He was marvelous. He has some great meditation tapes if people are ever looking for them, and Sitting in the Power.
Yes.
And it was the first time that I really started having where I stepped aside during trance and let it come through. And people were asking me questions, and then later on, I was back in America with with Robert Brown's classes and Marjorie Kite. She was president of the International Spiritualists at the time when she came over to do classes, and she had me come up and do a trance demonstration, and I had both my main guide William come through and Anna, who's another guide, and she asked them, and I'm hearing this, but I'm not hearing everything about John of God. And she says, I want you to tell me about John of God. And William said, he's a fake. I was like, uh-oh. And of course, Marjorie went a little ballistic, and she challenged him on that. And Anna came in. She said, she does it with mirrors. It's not good. He's a fraud. And of course, this was back in the early 2020.
Everyone loved him.
Yeah. And I am like cringing because I'm starting to come back in and hear all this stuff going on. And so then in the last couple of years, when they charged him with child molestation, et cetera, it was in a horrific situation. And I'm going, wow, trust your guides. They don't lie. That was it. Yeah. But that was really I tell you, when that came through in that message, it was a real test of whether or not I was in trance or not. And I was, so I said it. Oh my God.
That's wonderful. So this, a lot of people, take the mediumship and they go to a certain point, but you, I feel, went so deep into it, and some of the information that you got, it's been proven. But what's amazing to me, you wrote 6 books. I did put some illustrations into one of your books. What the dead say about
reincarnation. Oh, that's right. No, you did the one which was Rite of Passage. Which is here. And Rite of Passage, I guess you can't see that one too well, but at any rate, how can I do this so I've got it? Oh, there it is. So rite of passage, what the dead say. Now on this, was this picture down here of ectoplasm. And that was Three Nights and a Lady that they told me would be on the film. And when I was trying to look for a particular location, and I looked through all my digital photos that night before I left for Boston, and I couldn't find anything. And I was so mad at them. I said, how dare you? And when I got to Boston, I dropped the film off at CBS. And at CBS, when I got it an hour later, I kept looking, what's all over my film? All this, and it was ectoplasm of Three Nights and a Lady. And that's what I used on the cover of Rite of Passage. Yeah.
I pulled it up. I'm going to share this screen. See if I can get a little share. I know for you, for those
and that's it with the three Nights and the Lady in front of them. That's what I got. And they said, this is where we were, Mom, and this is West Calder. And I said, oh, wow. But I couldn't understand. I thought, what did I do here? But that's ectoplasm of the Three Nights. Incredible, incredible shot.
Wow, it's just phenomenal. And for those who are listening to this podcast, you can go onto YouTube and you can see the visuals. But if you look at Rite of Passage on Amazon by Deborah Richmond Foulkes, you'll see, look at the cover and you'll see this mist in here. In any event, I always wondered about that cover. I don't think we ever really went into it and talked about it. I said,
yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah. You know, I was listening to your podcast before talking about spiritualism, and a lot of things being down here in the South now. It was when I arrived in 2009, I found out that the law had just been changed in 2004, allowing people to give readings that we couldn't do it before. Oh, it's considered a misdemeanor, and more than one could get you in a big trouble.
Wow.
So it was wild. And I tried to figure out why. Well, Emma Harding Britton used to come down here, and she was just a wonderful medium in the South, but she knew her Bible backwards and forwards. So when she came in and was holding meetings for spiritualism, on the QT, people, one meeting, they came in to tar and feather her, and she quickly changed right over to be reading out of the Bible because she knew the Bible so well. And she just became a regular preacher in there. That was it. They left her alone. But she actually,
yeah,
I know. It's so,
well, it's a religion. You can't, I mean, it's against the law to persecute. But
yeah. And spiritualism became an official religion recognized in the United States in 1891. And so I knew that couldn't hold if we ever wanted to defy it. We could challenge the legislature, the General Assembly. But at any rate, they changed it just before I got here, so I didn't have to go through that. But it was wild. Emma Harding Britton shows up a lot down here in classes, and I really enjoy it. She convinced one man who owns several plantations, which were really large. Plantations are just large linked farms. And she convinced him to give his land to his daughters and release all his slaves. And this was before the war started.
Oh my goodness.
And he did. And he went to up north to escape. But Emma got out of there okay. But I mean, he was persecuted for it because it was really against the law to do that. So spiritualists were considered abolitionists and therefore not really loved down here.
I could see that. I could totally see that because of and their work up north with Lincoln and the abolitions and the women's rights movement.
Yeah. Sure. My great grandmother, Elizabeth Foster, attended a seance at the White House in 1863. She was there with her father, and they were from New Hampshire, and all the strange things that happened from 1834 on until Lincoln became president. They were brought in to build this town of Libertyville, Illinois. And in doing so, they became much closer friends with Lincoln, all the businessmen. It didn't matter. There weren't a lot of them, okay?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
when the war broke out, that's where they went. They went to Washington, and that's how she ended up going to a seance there. And the men ended, and they showed me what room she walked in. She showed me the brooch she was wearing, and I still have it. And she told me all the different things, but I didn't know there were pillars inside the front door of the White House, but there were. So yeah, and I saw the red room over in the back, and the men went off into the left-hand side. I don't know where they went, but probably a room where they went for brandy and smokes.
Yeah, the retiring room or something. What do they
Yeah,
call it?
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So going back to the story, you start with My Truth Lies in Ruins, and then you moved to In the Shadow of My Truth. And these books are full
Mhm.
of details and facts. And then you moved to My Truth is a Mist in Time. And then after that trilogy, you have Flames of My Truth, which was you were Janet Douglas.
Right,
And this was the also known as Lady Glamis, and you had lost your life.
right. It was because my husband at that time was a martyr and was murdered in the Tower of London in 1298. And I wanted to understand what martyrdom was, because I felt like I really detested what he did. I was a young woman left with all these children, and my money was pretty much limited because they took my big estates away, and it was a devastating time. And I really feel that I didn't talk to him for a while on the other side. So James, who was in that lifetime, convinced me to go ahead and reincarnate, and I knew that James is a character that was also Arthur Conan Doyle.
Oh,
And it came through when we were in Quincy Church that time, and I was sitting on the platform with others. I think I thought you were there too, and there was another medium whose name I've forgotten, but she brought him through as Arthur Conan Doyle. And she said, I can't believe I'm talking to Arthur Conan Doyle. And I said, yeah, it's okay. But now with this, I've got some pictures that I'll send so you can include them later on. But I drew James, or I did a pastel of James. And one of the things he did with me was to show, oops, let me see which way it is. Yeah, I'll send it to you. But James had these horns on top of the helm right here. And that's what was so strange. And then when he was Arthur Conan Doyle, in his book, he said I would find all the clues I needed. And so on this, in Arthur Conan Doyle up here, and I'll send, as I say, I'll send you the pictures. He had this helmet with horns on it, almost identical.
no
So
way. Wow.
so when he came through in spirit, he showed me the horns. And when I found his book that was written about, that he wrote in letters to his mother about his life, and that book is called Arthur Conan Doyle: A Life in Letters. And in this book, he talks about many things. And he talks about, for example, one day I was in the kitchen giving sardines to one of my deerhounds who had cancer. And I'm opening the can, and he says, oh, I love the wee fish. And I said, get out of here. You do not. What are you talking about? He says, no, you'll find the clues. It's all validated there. In past lives, as with any other reading, the most important thing are those tiny little facts. So when he gave me that fact about the wee fish and some other things, I quickly got in touch with Garth Willey, who was, I think he's in Australia, and he's a master on Conan Doyle. So I said, hey, Garth, did you like da, da, da? No, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was crestfallen. I said, well, I'm sure I got that message, Anyway, within a few days, the book came, Letters to Ma'am. And he writes in that, dear ma'am, thank you for the box of sardines. The guys and I were very happy to have it. We've only been having our 2 meals a day of bread and butter and milk with water in it, watered down milk. So yeah, fascinating, huh?
Saved his life, probably, are wonderful.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's how that's the way that spirit kept coming to me with different things. And so people say, "Oh, so you just sat down and you just wrote it?" And you didn't. No, it happened over a period of years that I got the information.
It did. I remember, and I totally I remember this, and I remember your trips to Scotland, and I remember talking to you after you got back, and yeah, this was, and then the first book, and then I said, and then the second one, I was like, when did you do this book? And it was,
Yeah,
you worked
yeah,
hard. You worked
yeah.
great.
It really was, because we ended up with these are the other two. I mean, they're not small. You know, they're not small. There are a lot of pages, and the research was, impeccable. Um, at least I wanted to make sure I didn't make any mistakes.
Mhm.
And I would go over things all in all. I spent just doing the research. I spent over $400,000,
Oh,
and I spent just $30,000 alone on top of that for access to the original documents. I had to pay like almost $3,000, I think it was, for the Ragman roll, which was a roll that William Lahardy put his seal to not once but twice. He's the only one that did it twice, and that we could find. And anyway, so all these things had to come out, and I said, well, I've got to do it. Fortunately, Ed had a small inheritance at that time from his dad. I say small, it wasn't millions of dollars, but it was starting to cover all my expenses. And so for 4 years, 3.5 years, 34 trips alone just to Scotland and England.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and
So
yeah,
determined. So determined. Now, you told me that this book, or there's a screenplay. You also wrote a screenplay, and that it's in
right.
the hands of Andy Mason. Let's talk.
Yeah, Andy, I met the Masons in Woodham Ferris. It was a strange day. I was trying to get in the St. Mary's Church there, which was part of the old manor. And I knew that I had been in it before because, as I say, it's part of the original manor, and you went to church all the time. So I was standing outside, and this man came up. He looked like a leprechaun. He was so short, and he came up and he says, "I kind of help you there, miss." And my accent's a little bit off, but anyway, he was just so bubbly and nice. And he says, "Oh, you have to go next door and talk to the monks to get the key." And I said, "The monks?" I said, "That's an old folks home now." Oh, he says, "Yeah, they're dead, but they're still there." I go, "Yeah, I kind of know that." So I went next door, got the key, which was over a foot long and about 6 inches deep. And I put it in the lock, opened right up, and I was in there. So, but before I went over there, I asked him, I said, "Do you know where the main manor is? Because I can't find it on the map." And he says, "Oh, you might try Manor Road." Yeah. And then you go feel like an idiot. Say, "Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I will do that. Thank you." I turned around to ask him again. He was gone. I mean, it just disappeared. Not
Wow.
any side of the road, not anywhere. And I said, "Was he really here?" You know? And anyway, so there I was. And it was a lot of fun. I drove up to the manor house, and I figured it would probably be a good idea not to go in. So I wrote him a letter, and they invited me to stay with them, or Sharon did, anytime I was in Essex, and to do my research out of the house. And I ended up staying at nearby Stebbing Park because I just liked the energy there. It was really nice. And so I didn't stay there. But later on, when I met Andy, he came into the living room with Sharon and I while we were having tea. And he says, "Hi, I'm Andy Mason." Good looking guy. I mean, he really was. He was a footballer. So he played football, and he was good looking guy, handsome. And Sharon's a lovely girl. I mean, she's very pretty. And so anyway, he says, "Hi, I'm Andy Mason. I work for Mel Gibson." And I mean, all my books involve Mel Gibson. All my books involve it's having somebody like James Caviezel or somebody like that play the part of James. And so I wrote the screenplay about James Lord Douglas, the Black Douglas. And I asked Andy if I could send it to him, and he said, "Sure." But he was no longer COO of Icon International in London. He was on his own. And then, of course, we had COVID hit. So right at the Oh, we had COVID hit before I said it, but it was just one of those things. We didn't know where it was going. And everything's pretty much stopped, but it is with the WGA and West Writers Guild of America. So who knows, someday.
I hope so. It's really an amazing tale to tell, and how you got it is phenomenal. But just in reading the book, and I really recommend, if you guys, want a good read, this is it's a good read. It's like it goes from one thing to another, and it's kind of riveting at times. So I remember this thing, and I don't know if it has anything to do with anything, but I remember Janet Douglas, or Lady Douglas, became widowed at some point.
Oh yeah,
And
her husband, and then
Yeah.
she got accused of murdering her husband.
Yeah.
And she wasn't even there. The man was a very difficult man, and if he was murdered, it was for his money, because he was a miserable soul. But it was in Lathe, Ayrshire, that he was murdered.
Yeah, but
And
her husband was a difficult man.
yeah, their first husband,
Her first husband was a difficult
Lord Glamis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, so he was murdered, but they tried to blame Lady Douglas for it, even though she was back in the lands of Angus. She was probably back at the castle itself, and with her 3 children. But they tried to blame her, and she was totally innocent of it. I mean, in those days, if you had a difficult husband, you just kept out of the way. But that was it. And they were generally much older, so waiting for them to expire was a prudent way to go about things. There was no divorce.
No, I'm afraid not. Well, you were property. You were chattel. Women did not.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Now, one of the things with Janet Douglas that's important to remember for me is that I had a recurring dream since I was a very little kid of swallowing something that I thought was poison. And I would wake up in the middle of the night. It didn't matter, even with, my husband, and just say, I swallowed it. I swallowed it. And he goes, "What's the matter?" "I've been poisoned." And he's trying to tell me it's okay. And what happened was that when I was going to be executed, and I used to have dreams of having my arms straight out on an armchair, a wooden armchair, tied straight back and being set on fire underneath. Only the winds at the castle came up so quickly that the fire spread immediately. But in Scotland, they did not permit noble women to be burned in that way. They garroted them first. So I remember going up the stairs to a platform and then being in the chair. And this coincided with the information I was later able to find, that's how they did it in Scotland. And they said that Lady Glamis came out and to walk up the platform, and her eyes were as big as saucers, and they were almost weeping, but they weren't tears, they were weeping. And I went, oh, and so I knew that I had been poisoned, and I realized that that the poison was something I ingested. So that was definitely part of it.
Or the burning.
Yeah. So
by the time the flames came, you probably
out of it. Totally out of it. Yeah. And and also I was garroted right away. So I've always had this funny scar here down here, and it doesn't go all the way around, but it's pretty odd.
So garroted means your neck was cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you went through an awful lot. You bled out, and you had the I had the poison. I was garroted, and then the flames came up. But I saw the flames come up, and then it all went blank. I think one of the things is when we tell people, especially as mediums, and I talked about this to Gary Schwartz, who wrote the book, The Afterlife Experiments. And he said he thought we had a big brain on the other side, and that our brain here was a communication device, as well as being a recording device. So we recorded what was going on with us, send it off in communication. But as soon as the brain died, that was it. So a lot of times, like if you're reading for somebody and you say, oh, they were in a car accident, all of a sudden, and they died immediately, you go, the person comes through and said, everything went blank. I didn't see it, didn't feel a thing. And that's like the biggest relief for a mom who sees her son going into a tree and,
Right.
yeah, and being in a horrific accident. So I think that's something we need to remember, specifically on these horrendous deaths, that we don't really experience all of it. That's why
I went to, I brought somebody, I remember having that same experience. This mom, bereaved mom, came in and wanted to, it was a fairly famous murder done by gunshot. And,
right.
and she wanted to know what happened. And I had the whole story up in till the time when he saw the person, and then there was nothing. It just went blank. And I explained to her, there's nothing more. And she thought, I just took a day off of work to hear this. And she was, I felt my heart broke, because it was what she wanted, or what she thought she wanted wasn't quite in her son's experience. And
and that's exactly the reason. Now, when Gary Schwartz wrote his book, The Afterlife Experiments, he was the one that tested, Robert Brown, John Edward, and let me see, Suzanne Northrop and others. But I mean, those were the big three, and still are in my mind in this country. And he tested them, and they didn't get any better than 80%. So we were all having dinner one night, Robert Brown, myself, some other people, and he joined us. And that's when he started talking about this communication. And I just think that's fascinating, because it helps us as mediums to understand that when there's a horrific end, if the brain gets hit first, there's no recording of it. And I have one of my people, David, who was killed by an IED explosion in Vietnam. And he described it to me, showed me things, but at the end, there wasn't anything. I couldn't see anything. And even the people that were there who said, oh, well, the explosion blew me off the truck and this, that, and the other. I talked to all the people who were in the Jeep with him, and they had full memory, but he didn't. So, yeah, that's what happens. I'm absolutely convinced that Gary Schwartz has a very good thesis on that explanation.
Interesting. Well, before we go a little further, I do want to tell people how to reach out to you. You can reach Deborah at Dr. Foulkes, Foulkes, at skybear.com. And is there anything else you want to share about how people could contact you?
Well, there's a cell number right on there. I do text messages, and it's in Raleigh, North Carolina, 919-339-3178.
Good. If you want to share that,
it's right on the website, so they can always find it there.
Great. Great. Not knowing if I should share this or not. Thank you for doing that for me.
Oh, well, no, absolutely. I've been all over the country speaking like that. And the great part of having a cell phone is that if you can't talk, you just can't talk at that time.
But you can text away later on. And also, you're still doing readings.
Absolutely. And I do readings. I do virtual classes. I do master's classes for Reiki. I do mentoring. I know you do mentoring too. I do mentoring that's a little more, well, I manage my people a lot differently. I let them run the show, how much they want and what they want to get out of it. And it's worked very well especially down here. We found a lot of people really like to come to classes, and yet with the COVID and everything else, and now they're telling us to mask up again. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's really nice to be able to do virtual classes or one-on-ones.
Absolutely. The technology has really kept us connected, and a lot of really amazing ideas now that we're in the overload information age, but still to have this information at our fingertips, we were not isolated from, and that was I think a good move.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
To go through this again, we know how to do it really well. Also, you mentioned something. I want to pull you back to that. You have Brian Weiss, you studied with him. Do you do past life
Regressions, absolutely. Some of my clients still do them over the phone because I've been working with them a long time. I do them in person in Raleigh. I also do them over virtually, like FaceTime, etc. And I've worked a lot with, especially with our military and this big military presence down here with PTSD. And my own father had PTSD. He passed last year. He's a Marine. So he was working with a lot of Marines in the Manchester, New Hampshire area. And a lot of them, the most important thing is to let people know that when a lot of times military come through and they'll be, say, in World War I, and they'll be in the trenches, and maybe the mustard gas or whatever gets to them, or they don't make it out, and a couple guys do, and then they reincarnate years later, and they're in Vietnam, and they make it out, and their friends don't, and they kind of say, well, why me? Because it's that survivor's syndrome that they go through of why me. And then they find out that they were just, they just had to heal from that other situation by coming through and incarnating once again. And it's fascinating to watch. And the things that come out with people that say, oh, no, I can't meditate. And then you draw them through and walk them through that. And the beauty of it, different from Brian Wise, is that, and I'm sure you could find the same thing, when you're working with these people who are going through the actual regression, you get to link in as a medium and you can see what they're experiencing. And that's the key. I don't bring it up during anything to do. I let them have their full experience. Then when I bring them back out and I talk about it, then I say, you saw this. And they say, well, I saw this. I said, well, here's also what you saw. Oh, I did. I saw something like that. I didn't know what it was. And all of a sudden, now you're building the story and they own it. And once they own it, that's when it becomes a healing exercise.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm right on with you with that. Once they have that experience, and then as a medium, yes, you could bring more into it, but they could feel it viscerally, and their body knows it, and their body's been hanging out with all these crazy memories, and it puts things into a healing place. It's so you do. I'm so glad you do that still. So so that
it's my favorite thing that I do. And also around here we have I think in any major city you have issues going on now with some of the violence, or crazy things like people will come to you and say, why did my son do this, or why did this have to happen? And you try to go with the son and explain what happened, but it's always has linked to past lives, almost always, and healing. But it doesn't matter. If people want to go there, I go there. If they don't, they don't. But past lives is the key to everything as far as I'm concerned. Mainly because if you have a recurring dream, that's what it's about. It's about a past life.
Interesting. A recurring dream, past life. I'd have to I've written so many dreams down, and I've wondered, this seems a little bizarre, but I also sometimes see things in symbolically, because seeing them it's like, oh no. But when you read dreams or past lives, I love that.
Oh yeah, it is. It's fascinating. And traveling and doing the things, of course, I travel to other cities now with all the expos and what have you, and I'll meet different people in different areas, and it's fascinating the perspective they have, and it's all the same. It really is. It's all the same. Once you open up to spirit, you don't have to be a medium to understand, because it's through the solar plexus, as we know. It's that gut experience or that gut feeling. And it's just being comfortable with spirit and not being afraid. So I think that's the most important part, especially for me in the beginning, because I was afraid. I went, I'll tell you a funny story. When I was first learning about meditation, and before I got into the circle at Quincy Church with Rita Berkowitz there as our teacher. And she is a great teacher, by the way. She got me to relax. And that was like what I really needed. At any rate, there was Rita. I hadn't gotten there to Rita's class. And I'm driving down Route 1 and I see this thing, ESP. And it was an old iron building. And so I went in there and I got in, and it was all right. There's incense going and it's kind of mood like color, lights and everything. I sit down and this woman comes out and she opens her deck. She wants to do tarot to start off the reading. She goes, "There's a dark cloud over you." And I went, "Oh my God, what did I do?" and she says, "For $100, I fix." I went, "Fate don't fail me now." And so I got out of there and I called Lydia Clark right away. And she was very hard to get a hold of at that time. She was extremely busy because of John Edward and everything and her discovery of him. And and so she picked up the phone. She says, "They're gypsies. Stay away from them." It's like, so that was my experience. You can always find something that'll scare the heck out of you working with spirit. But that was what I did.
That was your scary part. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
For sure. Well, I really thank you for asking me to be on this podcast. It's been a lot of fun catching up as well.
Oh,
And
God.
like you're doing a lot of great things. I'll send you a couple of those pictures in an email immediately so that you'll have them. And
Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. You have I don't know why I haven't had you on sooner, but you have such a unique take on past lives because of how deeply you've gone into it. And I think it's really important for people to hear about what the possibilities are with understanding past lives. And I'm really thrilled and honored that you came on, even with a little bit of scratchy throat there. But yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. That's it's for the episode. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Deborah Richmond Foulkes or reach out to me and I'll get you in contact with her. She is a really interesting woman, very knowledgeable woman to talk to. And you know how I love to bring you people who are available to you so that you can learn from them. And if this is something that inspires you, please follow it through, because that's what we're here for. That's what we're here to do. And just remember that this podcast is about soul-powered learning, soul-powered growing. So we're growing into beyond our lives, beyond what we actually do. And the more you grow into your soul, the more powerful and fulfilling your life becomes. So thank you for joining us. And again, thanks again, Deb. It's awesome.
Thank you, Nancy. Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.